You're listening to the Cinemental Podcast.
Shall we begin?
Welcome back to the Cinemental Podcast, where we discuss mental health themes from cinema, television, and popular culture. I'm Jeffrey Jones, and I'm a filmmaker and professor, and I'm joined, as always, by my brother, Dr. Joshua Jones, who, as well as being the inventor of 6-7, is a general and forensic psychiatrist. But no one knows
Jeff,
where 6-7 came from, so it might as well have been you.
Jeff, as you know, I like to drive things into the ground, and my children absolutely hate the fact that I love 6-7. But I did have an amazing interaction the other day. My son and I were getting ready to go skiing, and we were just talking outside the car, and there was this family across the road from us, and they were a Spanish-speaking family, and they were talking about how to get going, but they had two small kids, and Anthony said 6-7 to me, and the young girl's head whipped around right at us, and she locked eyes with me, and she very tentatively gave me the old up-down hands thing, and I went back and gave them right back to her, and she just giggled and laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed. So, you know what, Jeff? 6-7, crossing boundaries.
She didn't say, "Se siete."
No, I wish I had thought of that.
It's so funny that our generation makes fun of 6-7 as it being ridiculous, because we had so many things that were equally, if not more, ridiculous. And I'll give you a perfect example, and you're going to be able to chime in here with me. Budweiser frogs, Josh. What's up? Or it wasn't the frog, whatever, but
No,
it was a Budweiser thing. It was just the friend. What's up? And for years, we all went, what's up to each other. So
I don't think
we are no
is
better.
stupid at all. I think 6-7 is amazing. I think 6-7 is a cultural touchstone that is very psychologically important, where we have something to connect with each other about. And is it ridiculous? Is it meaningless? Yes and no.
Yeah, it's not meaningless because we connect over it. That's the thing.
Yeah.
It's the point of communication.
I think it's wonderful.
I agree. I totally agree. And I don't have any issue with my students doing it. And they catch me like, oh, let's turn to page 67. 67! I go wild with them. I have no problem with that.
That's why I loved the prequel to the show that we're going to talk about, because I love Severance.
Oof. That was a fantastic reach.
Yeah.
All right. We want you to start your week off right with our podcast, so we drop a new episode every Monday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts, or you can watch our hottest and spiciest clips and now full episodes on YouTube. Josh, it's the start of a new year, and we are starting off strong with Severance. Severance is a Apple TV show about a group of people who work in an office who have been severed from their daily lives. There's innies and there's outies, and we're going to talk about all of that today. But before we do, Josh, we have a sponsor. We haven't had a sponsor in a little while. I don't know why. Our podcast is awesome, so sponsors need to come out of the woodwork. But we do have a sponsor today, and today's episode is brought to you by Navel. The first moisturizer made exclusively for your belly button. You moisturize your face, you moisturize your hands. Some of you moisturize your elbows like they've been through war. Some of you moisturize other parts of your body, but your belly button completely ignored until now. So Navel uses dermatologist ingredients to hydrate, soothe, and emotionally support the most forgotten part of your body. Whether you've got an innie or an outie, or something science hasn't classified yet, Navel goes deep and services both.
I see what you did there. And this is a very neglected body part.
No, I agree.
Which is,
I agree.
Very important. It is the way that we get our nutrients when we're in utero, and then it stops being important.
This is right. Then it's just a reminder that at one point you were connected to your mother. Okay, so Josh, today we are talking about Severance, as I mentioned. For those who haven't seen it, Severance is built on a chillingly simple idea. What if you could completely separate your work self from your personal self? Employees at Lumen Industries undergo a procedure that splits their consciousness in two. Their innie, who exists only at work, and their outie, who never remembers what happens there. Each version lives a fully contained life, sharing a body but nothing else, raising unsettling questions about consent, identity, and who really owns a person's time. As the innies begin to question the nature of their work and the ethics of their existence, Severance transforms office culture into psychological horror. The show isn't about corporate secrets so much as it's about autonomy, whether a version of you created for labor deserves freedom, meaning, and choice. By literalizing work-life balance, Severance exposes how modern systems quietly demand we fracture ourselves just to survive. And I want to give you a little bit of time here, Josh, because I know how much you loved this show. And so I want to give you some time to just gush about how much you loved Severance.
You're a dick.
Maybe talk a little bit about whether or not you think that this idea has been explored better in other places.
Yeah, Jeff gave it away there. I didn't like this show at all. I still don't like this show.
You're going to get both sides, people, because I did love this show. So this is not going to be a hate on Severance episode. This is going to be a Josh and I debate episode.
Look, am I saying that this is not prestige television? I'm not saying that. I mean, Apple TV is the new prestige television, especially since Netflix is apparently going to Netflixifies HBO. Is it well made, well shot, well written, well acted? I mean, I can't argue that it's not. What I can say is it's just boring as hell. And, I tried watching it a few years ago. I love Adam Scott. I think he is one of the really undervalued.
No, you don't.
Yes, I do.
You told me the other day you hated Adam Scott.
No, I didn't. I said I hated Adam Scott as a dramatic actor.
Oh, fair.
Because I think he has been absolutely hilarious. He was hilarious in Parks and Rec. He was hilarious in Party Down. I've loved him in everything he's been in until this. He makes me laugh when he appears on the screen. This is just not a good show. I'm sorry. It's just not. It doesn't do it for me. And here's why. I get all the questions that it's asking, but it's been done better other places first.
Right.
The toxic office culture, which this is a satire of, was done better with The Office, for Christ's sakes. I mean, they go...
Also starring Adam Scott.
In The Office?
Wasn't he in later seasons of that? No, Parks and Rec. I'm thinking Parks and Rec, aren't I?
Parks and Rec.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Jeff, let me tell you about the industry and...
okay, move on.
It was just done better in The Office. I mean, this takes it to the ludicrous toxic level, the part where it's actually killing you from the inside out. And I get that that's important for some people, and I get that that's a new concept. But The Office did it better. And then the conceit of the other person, of the severed person, I thought it was a very good 22-minute Rick and Morty episode.
Right. Do you remember the name of that episode?
Yeah, it was The Night Family.
The Night Family, yeah.
It was just done better. It was done tightly and tautly. The concept of who really owns the personage if you have two different consciousnesses living inside the same person.
Right. Do you want to take another crack at the word consciousness?
No, I said it perfectly. Everybody else is saying it wrong. Everybody else is saying it wrong.
Everybody else is saying it like they're not drunk.
I said it perfectly. Consciousness.
That's okay. I still have a problem with the word Christmas. My mouth is...
Yeah, you do.
Christmas.
You add like 7 or 8 R's in there. Christmas.
That's okay.
I do appreciate how you often try to use humor to water down my excellent points, but...
I don't think I watered it down at all. You make an excellent point. I agree with you. I love Rick and Morty. I think Rick and Morty unfortunately undoes a lot of other television because it's so brilliant that it's like, oh yeah. I mean, if you watch Rick and Morty, you're like, yeah, The Night Family was a better version of this, a much faster version. If they can do it fast and you have to take 2, 3, 4 seasons, they gotcha. I'm with you. I just also think that this show has, its own sort of value for what it is. But
sure. And I want you to talk about that because my last point before I throw it over to you so that you can give your counterpoint about this is I'm not saying that there aren't really good pieces here that we're going to talk about and you're going to hear me say they did this really well. They did this really well. For some reason, for me, it just doesn't fit together.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
It bores me.
Yeah, and I'm not going to talk about how great the show is right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through how much I love science fiction and the power of what if, but we're going to do that a little bit later because I do want to dive into some of the mental health issues. And so, we've essentially talked about it already, but let's talk about indentured servitude. And that is sort of summed up no better for me than Helly's line halfway through. And this is when I thought the season really started to take off. I thought the first 2 episodes were boring. I think it's episode 4, but Helly comes on after her innie has threatened to like chop her fingers off. And Helly sends a message back to her innie and says, if you hurt my body in any way, I will keep you there forever. I am a person. You are not. I make the decisions. You do not. And it is a very cruel message to her innie. But I do think that Helly believes it. I am a person, you are not. I make the decisions, you do not. That's essentially what we're talking about here when we're talking about Severance. The new person wakes up and is forced to work. Do you agree with that sort of classification? Is that what's happening here? Because I do think that this has some implications for the future in our world.
I don't agree with it from a psychological perspective. As we see from the PD character, the distinction between the innie out and an outie is really a false one. It is created by this medical procedure, this implanting this chip in there. But if the chip is removed or it is altered, then it becomes clear that they're really the same person. Of course, and you're going to talk about this as you talk about the science fiction what if, of course, this is not a reality in our world. This is not something that can be done. Am I going to say that it could never be done? I'm not going to say that, but I'm going to say it's not done now. The person, the brain, the mind is one. However it's split up, it still has the possibility or the inherentness of being one. You know, Jeff, as you and I were preparing for this show, we thought about talking about whether or not this was a take on dissociative identity disorder or multiple personality disorder. Right. And I'm going to argue very strongly that it isn't. I mean, I think some people could say, "Oh, wait a minute, isn't this a commentary?"
You have multiple personalities, therefore, how is it not? But I agree with you.
I think that this is going to be there's a commentary on multiple personality, and should we consider these other personalities as separate beings? And the answer to that is no. I mean, I think you could take a stance on that, but I don't think that's backed up by science. I don't think that's backed up by experience, especially as integrate aspects of a person's personality. Mm-hmm. We find that they have much more in common, especially around a trauma bond, than they have separate. And they're contained in one mind, one brain. Now, this is our scientific appreciation of the concept now. Maybe it changes in the future. I don't think so. And I think the other thing that makes this Severance distinct from the idea of dissociative identity disorder is that they're not actually different personalities. They have the same personality, but they're temporally and spatially distinct.
Right.
So it's as if you're just living in a different space and time, but they have the same personality characteristics as their outie. They're just shaped differently.
Which I thought was an interesting choice because you did have the ability as, a screenwriter here to make a comment about nature versus nurture. If you are sort of starting over a little bit where you don't have the memories, you don't have certain traumas, like Adam Scott's character doesn't have, a trauma, and a trauma sort of shapes our behavior in ways. Could you have a character who is completely different than he is in the outside world? And I think it would have been interesting if one of the characters had been that way. And they explore a little bit of it with the PD character, where PD is exceptional at his job inside, and he is not good at having any responsibility. You see it in season 2, where he's not a very good father, living a very kind of not gross lifestyle, but he just doesn't have his shit together. And he does inside Severance. And so it's very interesting how, in different situations, people will flourish. And I think they could have explored it more.
I think you mean the Dylan character.
Dylan character, I apologize.
Played by Zach Cherry.
Let me ask you this, Josh. Do you think that you could thrive or exist in this manner as an innie who has been severed?
Absolutely not. It's a horrendous severing of parts of your personage. I mean, they talk about it and they show it very vividly that you just wake up in the elevator and it's nothing but toil. I think the Dylan character says that to Helly. Yep, toil after toil after toil. It's a horrendous, grotesque lifestyle.
It is compared to your other lifestyle, but you don't know your other lifestyle. And so I think that there's something really interesting about how this show explores that, where they give them little treats. Mm-hmm. And is that enough for someone who doesn't know any different? And I thought that was a massively interesting sort of psychological part of this what if. Is it enough that it's like, here's a one of those finger traps, here's a coffee cozy? Is that giving you a little bit of dopamine hit? Are they giving you just enough to continue you doing the work in a life when you don't know any different?
But they do know different, and they set this up. They do. They set this up from the very beginning that while you don't have your personal memories, you do have structural memories about existence, right? And they set this up from the very beginning when they bring Helly in. She doesn't know anything about herself. She doesn't know anything about her mother's eye color. She doesn't know anything about the company, but she knows at Delaware's estate. They know what things are like sleep. They know what things are. They know how to speak. So you don't have your personal memories. That's what's severed. But you still have functional memories.
But not functional memories of learning, but not of experience.
But they know what things are.
I know that they know what things are.
But they know that sleep's restored.
But this is interesting because they talked about this in Good Will Hunting, which I thought was amazing. They know what the sky is, but they've never experienced it. They've never seen it. So they don't necessarily have an emotional connection with those things. They just know what they are. I don't know. I think it's interesting.
I mean, it's so trying to argue, of course, the conceit of this fake universe is probably not the right point. Your point is that, or your question was, are these little gifts enough to keep somebody going?
Right.
And I think a lot of actual business culture is predicated on this.
This is what I'm
pizza
sort of
party,
getting
the
to,
little
exactly.
I mean, the maturing proletariat, if you will, recognizing about what we really want or what people really need, is rejecting that over and over and over again. I mean, in the medical world, pizza party has really become a pejorative term.
Right.
So especially during COVID, when everybody was working ungodly hours for not more pay mostly and things like that, health systems who were claiming bankruptcy, and many of them were, although the insurance companies and other parts of the medical system were flourishing, would say, hey, we appreciate you. Here's a pizza party for an hour out of your day. And that was hour out of your day once every 6 months. And that was supposed to make up for the fact that inflation was outpacing wages and your per hour, your hourly wage was dropping because you were being asked to work more and more. It's a pejorative thing. That is part of the satire of this show.
Which I can't make anything about pizza pejorative. It's an absolute shame. But Josh, let's pivot a little bit from the show because the conceits of the show is the idea of work-life balance, being that you don't have to think about work when you're at work. Let's talk about work-life balance a little bit because it's certainly interesting to me, the evolution of work-life balance. And I talked about this with my therapist at one point about how the Industrial Revolution essentially made people really soft. And before the Industrial Revolution, it was just kind of like accepted that you went to work, worked as hard as you could, tried to rest, and went right back to work. For years, centuries, that was our life. And I'm not saying that's a good life. I don't want to go back to that. But it's really interesting how a work-life balance has changed so much in the last 100 years, in the last 10 years. Walk me through some of the psychological components of work-life balance and how it's changing.
I'm going to argue with you a little bit that pre-Industrial Revolution, people probably had not a work-life balance, but work-life was the same thing. I mean, people were mostly working for themselves in, growing their own food and doing their own, setting their own hours. You worked constantly because you were trying to work to survive. And then the Industrial Revolution came along and the owners started to be able to disengage your work effort from your own ownership. You came in, gave your work effort, and then you got basically tokens back that you could then spend on your stuff. And really the only way that work-life balance since the Industrial Revolution has equilibrated is through reform, through laws, because
Is equilibrated a real word? That sounds like a Don King word.
Equilibrated?
Or is it just equalized? Is that a real word?
Yeah. Look it up on Wikipedia. Give me 5 minutes and then look it up on Wikipedia. I think equilibrated is a word. Absolutely.
I didn't get that at first.
I know you didn't. Yeah, no.
All right, so we're equalitizing our workify production.
Okay. Again, so work-life balance really only comes through reform and workers standing up through their own work effort, through unionization, through legislation to say, hey, we don't want to work to death. We want to have some kind of work-life balance.
Because our product doesn't belong to us the way that it used to be.
Right.
We need to be able to enjoy more of our life and put some of our work into our own product, and that's a negotiation between the two, which I look, I'm all about work-life balance. I think that, you and I were certainly raised in a different time where it was like you work hard and you do whatever the corporation wants, and that's how you get ahead and that's how you get raises. And, I certainly was the kid who, when I wanted to be an agent, I was working 60 to 70 hours a week for minimum wage. I also got promoted to agent within a year, which was the fastest promotion that agency had ever seen, because I put in, that work, put in those hours. And that's an industry where nobody cares, how long you've been doing the job. It's how much can you produce? And I didn't have any problem with that. But as an agent, you're also working more for yourself because you eat what you kill. Like, I have a commission structure. And so I am working for myself in a way, not just the company, but I'm directly benefiting from my work. But now it's a lot different. There is like, no, I'm going to clock in for 40 hours. You have me for those 40 hours and you have me doing the work that I am contracted to do. And if you want me to do other work, then you need to revise my contract and pay me more. And I think it's great. I think that's exactly what people should do. People should fight for that.
And the medical profession is really coming to grips with this concept as well. I mean, I was inculcated when I was a young pup doctor that you worked until the job was done. The problem with that is that if you're not working for yourself, then someone else can determine how much work there is, and they can keep piling on more work and piling on more work and piling on more work. And if you have the ethics that you work until the job is done, but yet you're not in control of that, that's going to get exploited. It just will. And honestly, why shouldn't it? If you look at it from a reasonable needs-based dynamic, of course it's going to get exploited until you stand up for it.
When I talk to people about corporations, what I try and tell people is corporations' job and capitalists' job is to use everything at their discretion to make as much money as possible. That's capitalism. It's our job as the people who actually control the laws to put things in their way to make our lives better. That's our job, is to restrict the ways that they use and abuse us. But asking one company or asking any companies to do things above and beyond the law is asking them to not be competitive with other companies who are taking the shortcuts. And so if we really want companies to be ethical, we need to put the provisions in place to prevent the other companies from being unethical. And that is why we need so much corporate reform. That's why we need laws in place to prevent corporations. We cannot ask corporations to be ethical because they'll be not competitive against the unethical corporations.
That's correct. And, one way to do that is through regulation, which has been the most successful way. The other way, and this has not been successful, is for the consumer to vote with their dollars and pay more for something that's more ethical, or something, or a company or a product that is produced in a more ethical way.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, en masse, that has not been successful.
Oh yeah, no, we're not good. We're not good at that. I don't think iPhone sales went down at all when people found out that they were using child labor. That's not a good one. Capitalists and executives will argue that we need to outlaw unions because they're not a market force. Unions are a market force. Everything is a market force. So people getting together and deciding, hey, our labor is worth more, and we're not going to work for you unless you pay us a living wage. Like, no, you can't do that. Yes, you can. That's a market force. Unionization is 100% a market force. That is one of your assets, which is labor, getting together and deciding to make it more scarce. 100% a market force, and I have no empathy for corporations
that's an interesting take on that.
Who are against unions. Let's get back to the show. And Josh, I'm going to geek out a little bit and do our screenwriting segment, because I want to talk about the power of what if. Yeah. Just as a writer, if you give me a good what if, I'm going to geek out about it. And Severance is a really good what if. The goal of any story is to get to a theme. And a theme is an artist's take on the human experience. It's my point of view about the human experience. And so if you're outside of science fiction, it'll often just be like, what's a doctor's ethical obligations? What's a father's obligations? The different lessons that we've learned, I want to tell a story about that. What's fun about science fiction is that you don't have to play in our physical world. You get to invent ridiculous things and then draw a conclusion about the human experience. And so this is a great what if of, hey, what if we could separate our work life and our home life? That's a very powerful what if, because we get immediately to the question of, well, think about the perspective of the person who's at work. You get on the elevator, the doors close, and they reopen, and you have to go back to work. Well, that would be miserable. But we don't think about that unless we have that really good scientific what if. And that's what's so powerful about science fiction, is it gets us to think about the human condition in new and interesting ways. Here's the important part of what ifs, and I'll get to this later in our top 5. The what if is an interesting jumping off point, but we always have to get around to the human experience part. If we linger on the what if, and if we linger on sort of the plot dynamics of it, we're missing the point. The point is, how do we think about the human experience in a new and fun way? And I'll give you the best example, Josh. You've heard of the trolley problem, right?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so the trolley problem is the simplest and easiest way to think of a what if. And it's more of a philosophical question than it is a science fiction question, but it's fantastic. There's a trolley coming down. On one side, there's a loved one. On the other track, there's a stranger. It's headed towards your loved one. Do you change the track? That's the what if. That's the moral question that you're asking yourself. And it becomes really interesting as you change what the trolley problem is. So it's like, I would change it to save my loved one. Okay, what if it's 5 people versus your loved one? Do you change it? There's endless iterations of the trolley problem, and it helps us understand who we are better. And that's what I love about science fiction is it's not about the science. It's not about the logistics of the science. It's about who we are on the other side of this interesting scientific question. And that's what's so fun about science fiction. And some shows like Star Trek: The Next Generation, all it was moral questions. It really didn't have to do with pattern buffers and starships and hyperdrives. It was all about moral questions. I think they did a really good job with this what if. I hear you that they cut to the chase with the Rick and Morty episode where they clearly made it about indentured servitude. But this asks an additional great question. If you do stop the severance, does that work person die? That's an interesting question. Yeah. And I don't know that I would have thought about that. What is the nature of existence? What is the nature of, does our consciousness mean that we're alive, and is the only way to survive if you're an innie is to be reintegrated? And as much as Helly wanted out, does getting out mean death? Does that part of her that has created friendships, that has created memories, does that mean death? And that is something that they did not talk about in the Rick and Morty episode. But I could geek out about what ifs forever. I don't even know if you have any reactions to it. I just wanted to talk about how awesome I think what ifs are. And this was a great one. This was a really good one.
This is an area where you and I agree. I love what ifs. I'm a giant science fiction buff. You and I grew up watching Star Trek: Next Generation nearly every day in reruns and syndication. And you're exactly right. Everything I love about science fiction, about superheroes, about that is about the what ifs. And and I think it's great to explore. I just didn't like it here.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
I mean,
what's interesting about the what ifs with superheroes, Josh, it's always the same question, but the only one who asks it was Spider-Man, which is, what do you do with this great power? Because with great power comes great responsibility. That's always the question with superheroes is, if you have this tremendous power, what is your responsibility to people? What is your responsibility to, your abilities? I tell nightly stories to my kid, and now they're an amalgamation of all the different Disney movies and shows that she's watched. There's this character named Mira. She's this kid royal detective, but Gandalf gave her the spyglass of eternity so she can look through this spyglass and see into the future. We eventually got to the point where she had to put this away and and lock it away because being able to see through the future was too powerful. I love these stories I'm telling my kid, and she's totally into it, and she can recap them. Even as a kid, we're like, yeah, some things are too powerful and humans shouldn't touch it.
Yeah, right. Which
it's like, that's scary, Dad. That needs to go in Aladdin and Jasmine's Keep.
Yeah,
that's below Piggy and Gerald's Oasis water park.
No actual human would give up that power. That's the unfortunate part.
Yeah, absolutely.
But getting back to your question though about the death of the innie, is that the only way to stop this? I do think that is a compelling piece. They talked about Helly, the innie, eventually trying to commit suicide,
right?
Which was pretty powerful, and they probably in their world would be a more common outcome.
100%
for people who think that they're trapped.
I didn't mention this earlier, Josh, but that's a super important point. Helly would not have been the first person to reject this, and that was a problem, I thought, with the show.
They didn't talk enough about that. Maybe they do later, because I think that they end up getting more into the backstory. I mean, obviously, these aren't the first people who were severed. The severance device was invented many years ago, we find out later,
right?
And all that kind of stuff. Although I will point out, even though Helly tried to hang herself, I don't think her true intention was to die, because the way she set it up for the outie Helly to wake up strangling, I think her intention was not to die, but to make a point that you can't put me down here. I think it was an escalation of, I'm going to chop my fingers off. She wanted the Helly to wake up strangling and for her to be rescued so that she didn't have to come back down there again. Which
that is interesting. That is interesting because she did it in the elevator.
Yeah, she did it in the elevator.
And so she's going to sever and wake up.
If you truly if she truly wanted to die, she would have done it in the bathroom where she couldn't have been found, etc.
Right.
Now, I think that's a semantic point, because the dramatic piece.
Have you gotten into season 2 yet?
I'm not going to watch season 2.
Okay. Well, we learned that Helly is an Egan. And look, to your point earlier about like personality, it does go along with her. I mean, she's a badass on the outside.
She has the same personality, yeah.
And so she is not going to, be okay with this inside. She's just not wired that way.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that speaks to that.
I'm not going to watch season 2. I did read the Wikipedia summaries of the episodes, though.
Nice. All right.
Yeah. So I'm caught up enough.
Yeah. That's where you discombobulate your skilabadoo. I got that.
But the whole Egan's, whole Egan. Yeah, she's an Egan. The whole Egan thing's fascinating, too.
Yeah. Let's get into that in a second. I want to ask you, and actually we should have talked about this first, because it has to do, with the main character. We do learn very early that the reason the Adam Scott character severs to escape his grief and to escape his trauma. He can't hold down a job. He has to hold down a job because he needs to make money. And so he chooses to sever so that the person that was working doesn't feel the same sort of grief. That decision to me makes sense. And I want you to talk a little bit about grief, because I want to do, the service of talking about the psychological part. We talk about mental health issues. So I do want you to talk a little bit about the things that we can do to get over grief. But then I want to talk specifically about the idea that like he's going to great lengths to just be able to function. So talk about grief first, and then I want to talk about the extremities of function.
Yeah, Mark's grief at losing his wife, or what we find out he thinks he loses his wife. Anyone's grief at losing a loved one is very real. It is emotionally, it's hardwired into us to feel sadness, to feel loss, to mourn someone. That is all a very natural reaction and not considered pathologic by mental health.
Yeah, explain that a little bit better.
There's a process.
I know what that means, but tell me what you mean by pathologic.
It's not considered abnormal in any way, shape, or form. In fact, somebody believing or somebody not showing any signs of grief is considered abnormal. It's such. Think of it this way, Jeff. Grief is such a universal experience. Mm-hmm. All of us are going to lose loved ones. All of us are going to lose something. And the pattern of how we grieve, with sadness, with the sense of loss, with tears, etc., wondering how the world's going to go on, things like that. It is so universal that it's obviously hardwired into us somewhere. It spans different cultures, it spans different continents, it spans time.
Right.
So it is clearly something that is hardwired into us to experience.
I have a weird question for you, and I actually think this might be interesting for people on the podcast. Winsy, right now, is experiencing a fair amount of grief towards Grandma Page, who she's never met. But the point is that she never met her, and she was sitting in the car the other day and just broke into like very serious tears. And I was like, Winsy, what's wrong? She's like, I miss Grandma Page. And I thought that was really fascinating that she is having real grief over someone that she's never met. Is it because she's comparing, like she knows one of her grandparents and so she's sad that she doesn't have a second one? Like, what is going on there?
That's exactly right. Yeah, she's projecting. She's projecting the experience that she has with her other grandmother onto the knowledge and the ever-evolving understanding of life, death, mortality. I mean, she's not quite at the age yet where you have a firm grasp of what death is,
right,
that it is permanent, that you cannot come back from it, etc.
Yeah.
But she's getting there.
Yeah, thank God for the movie Coco, because now it's like, oh, is she just in the land of the dead? I'm like, yep, that's where she is. She's in the land of the dead. Thank you, Coco. Thank you, Disney. This is going to get pushed off for a few more years. I'm good with that. I'm good with that.
Yeah. So she's projecting what she feels for her other grandma onto the knowledge that she's gaining and the understanding that she's gaining that, oh, I've missed someone. I know they've dead. I know they're dead. I know how other people react when people die.
Yeah.
And putting that all together.
Yeah.
Very natural, very normal.
It is.
Developmental stage.
If I had any sort of religion, I read a lot of Zen, and I still read a lot of Zen, like, a few koans a week. I love them. But the Buddhist mentality is to have as little belongings as you can because you don't get attached to things. And I think about this a lot with being a father, and I didn't realize like the power, that fatherhood was going to have on me. But like, I was a happy guy for 41 years without a kid. I was totally happy. Kid was born, and the second after she was born, if I ever lost that kid, I would be unconsolable, and I would probably want to end my life. Couldn't remember that I was happy for 41 years. The grief would be too much. You cannot love something without also being so attached to it that it would destroy you if you lose it. But I do think that that's the human condition. I think that we're supposed to get attachments. I think that the attachments are great. Like I love my children so much. And
of course.
And life would not have been as full and as amazing without them. And so it's like, yes, be a Buddhist, try and have no attachments, but also attachments are amazing. Like, I'm not attached to my car. I'm not attached to my phone. I'm not attached to anything. Like, if my house burned down, I would save my family. I would save my computer because there's just a lot of work I don't want to lose. It would be inconvenient. And I would save old Bly, Josh. I would save my blanket from when I was a kid. That's it, man. That's it. I don't care about anything else. I have zero. Every time people are like, oh, I don't want to get rid of this mug. I'm like, it's a fucking mug.
Well, Jeff, everybody sees things through a different lens.
100%.
And in the show, Mark obviously, and we don't see him pre-Severance, but Mark obviously has a tremendous amount of grief over losing his wife. And he's presented with the opportunity to live basically a third of his life without having to think about that. It's not the work, it's that really draws him in. He wants to basically skip the step of going through the grieving process.
Okay, yes. And I'm going to get back to that. Do me the favor, just very quickly. What are the best things people can do to get over grief? From your perspective, from the mental health perspective, just give me like the top 3 or 4 things that people can do to get over grief.
So as opposed to avoiding it, which you really can't do,
right?
Don't try to avoid it. If you are in a grieving cycle, grieving stage, do it. Think about it.
Right.
Don't try to avoid it. Of course, you got things you have to do. You have to go through your day. One concrete thing that I would do is don't shy away from people expressing their remorse or their sadness for you.
Right.
It may remind you of the grieving that you're going through, the loss that you've had, but it is a very universal and necessary step.
Are you
Another
allowed,
thing to
though,
do-
are you allowed to punch people in the face if they talk about how much they miss your dad?
Well, that's a whole other thing, Jeff. That's a whole other dynamic that I'm not super excited about. Is I don't like, and I really counsel people on this when they're the ones that have experienced the losses. I tell them, do not accept from others that you have to make them okay with your loss.
Yes.
And I really, really counsel people.
From the roof, from the rafters.
Yeah, you don't need that. That's not part of your grieving process.
Right.
And I have even called people out on that when I've gone through grieving. Is like, look, I don't have the energy to make you feel okay with my loss.
I love that. Say that again, because I think that's super important. I love that phrase.
I don't have the energy to make you feel okay with my loss.
Yeah, I love that.
Most of the people who I've said that to, I don't lead with that. That's when someone's being pretty narcissistic and like,
Sure.
I can't do this. I need you to stop.
You know what phrase I use?
It comes off as pretty dickish, to be honest.
I don't care, but I don't care.
True.
I don't care.
It's also true.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and here's a hint for people, or here's a clue for people. I am pretty famous among my friends for being able to say real dickish things, and it's because I practice. I say a lot of dickish things, and so people sort of expect it. And so when I say the dickish thing, people are like, that's just Jeff. One of the other phrases that I've used a lot lately, and it's very powerful, is, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not open to criticism today. And man, it just shuts people down, because there are times where people are like, hey, blah, blah. It's like, sorry, I'm not open to criticism today. And it's fair. It's setting a boundary. I think anytime you're setting a boundary, that's okay. And we should set more boundaries. We don't need to deal with people being jerks. I see this all the time on TikTok. There are, women who are recording, and guys come over and they want to critique their form or something. And it's like, you could just shut those fuckers down. Just shut them down. You don't have to be nice to people who are criticizing you. You can just set the boundary very cleanly. And the cleaner you set a boundary, the better. Don't have this little minefield that maybe people can navigate through. No, set a wall. Set a big wall that people can see.
Jeff, another thing people can do when they're really grieving is that they can give themselves a lot of grace and understand that they don't have to bite off the whole getting over it in one chomp.
Yeah, don't feel bad for feeling bad.
In fact, change the narrative that you're not trying to get over a loss. You're trying to incorporate it into your new existence.
Right.
And I know I've said that a lot, but let me give you some really
you can't say it enough. You can't say it enough either. I agree with that.
But here's some concrete steps on what to do. And I counsel people on this, especially when I can't even get up off the floor. I can't even get out of bed. I can't stage of things.
Right.
Very tiny, small steps that give you wins, or at least crack the door to getting a win, is really important. It's like when we talked about New Year's resolutions. I hate New Year's resolutions because it's a big swing, and true, honest to God behavioral change comes from small, sustainable steps. So I even try to coach people, okay, instead of saying I can't, let's change that phrase to this is really hard. Both are true. This is really hard is actually more true than I can't. You actually can. It's just really hard.
Right.
And so then take tiny little bites. I can't find that in my will to go to work today. Okay. It's really hard to go to work today. So I'm going to at least get up and call my boss and tell him I'm not going to work.
Right.
That's a step. Take these as little steps. And if you are at the point where it is that disabling, that may have crossed over from grief into, an adjustment disorder or a depressive disorder where you need to get some professional help.
Okay, and now we're going to get Mark back into the conversation, but I want to say this real quick because I want to give people a concrete example. I'm trying to do some very hard things right now. Usually my workday starts at 5 and my workday doesn't end till 1 in the morning. That's the path that I have taken to accomplish what I want to accomplish. There are times where I don't feel like getting up. I have one thing that I do. I roll over, I open my journal, and I read a quote. Discipline is choosing between what you want now and what you want most. And that helps me, and I just read it, and I read it over and over again until I gain the strength to get up and go about my day. But I don't have to get up and go about my day. What I have to do is get up and open my notebook. That's it. And so that's an example of doing the one thing that can kind of help you. We've had some very challenging days lately. My kid was in the hospital over Christmas. I'm not going to get into that, and there were just some days where I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to get through it today. And it's like, oh, let me just open my book. Let me do the one thing. So it just talked about that.
Jeff, it is important to say that she's fine.
It is important to say she's fine. My kid is absolutely going to be fine. She's going to make full recovery. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Okay, let's get back to Mark S. because this is what I think is really interesting about Severance. He's choosing something very dramatic so that he can, one, deal with the grief. But this, I think, is an important part to talk about for the audience. He's also doing it because he tried to go back to work and failed miserably. Josh, we have to work. Some people don't have the ability to not go to work. How do you feel from a mental health standpoint about people just doing whatever it takes? To
a point, whatever it takes, because you don't want to compound your issues. Because I think you know where you're leading. I mean, some people get to the point where they're like, I'm gonna do this drug because it gives me the up to go and even get through my grief. Obviously, I don't recommend that.
You don't recommend it, but can you completely write it off?
Yeah, I'm not going to recommend that at all. I mean, I know people do it, but it's not the right thing to do for your long-term health.
But this is the thing, long-term health versus short-term.
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
And that's when I would go back to your inspirational quote that you just said. What is it now versus what you want most? And what you want most is you want to heal, you want to get through it. And yes, I get it. Some people absolutely have to work. Fortunately, we live in a time where we have advocated for bereavement time, where we've advocated for protections in your job, Family Medical Leave Act, where you can go and you get a doctor's note and say, hey, this is beyond grief. This is depression. I need some time off. All that people should avail themselves of all those things that are available to them to help out here. That may not be enough, and you may have to just push through and go to work. And that's where I would say, do the small steps and get help. And that help doesn't have to be just a counselor. It is, who are your friends? Who are your family? Who can help support you in this? Who can prop you up in this? You can get through grief. While it is a universal experience to experience grief, it is also a universal experience to get through it.
I hear you. And all of that is very well said. I'm not disagreeing with you on anything like that. Let me ask you this question.
You're about to disagree with me.
Nope, I'm not. I'm going to ask you a question. So you and I have both had, some mental health issues. And there were times before we got help where we just had to knuckle up and get through the day. Mm-hmm. Are there some things that you did that were unhealthy that you look back on and you're like, you know what? I'm actually not super mad at myself for doing that. I wouldn't do it again necessarily, but have there been some things? And I'll lead the conversation here. I was feeling incredibly depressed when I shifted from my first agency to my second agency. And there were days where I was like, I drove to work in my Jeep Wrangler, my open top Jeep Wrangler, and smoked a joint on my way because I was so fucking depressed and I just needed something. I just needed something to chill me out. And then I was able to go in and do my work, but I couldn't have done it. I couldn't have done it without it. I don't recommend it. If I'd gotten found out, probably would have been fired, but it's what I needed in the moment. And I did it, and it was successful. And I can't say that was the wrong thing to do because I did just need to get through the day.
Yeah, I don't have anything as dramatic as that. I will say that I started my pediatric rotation in medical school the day after Dad died. Because I had to get back on track. I mean, you'll remember that. I'm like, hey, this is all awful. Let's have a good cry. By the way, I got to be in Tacoma tomorrow at 6 a.m.
Right.
And should I have taken additional time off? Looking back on it, as a psychiatrist, I would have recommended it, but I didn't, and I pushed through. Was I 100% present there for my own learning and for the children I was taking care of? I wasn't. But sometimes you can't be, and this is another good lesson of Severance, is that it is a balance. It is not black and white. You can't shut off what's going on in the external world for your work, and you can't shut off what's going on at work for your external world. And I think that's the real lesson of Severance, is that it truly is a balance. We are not always present in one place solely, whether it's at work or at home, and you have to learn to create that balance, not so much a balance, but a healthy tension between all the parts of your being, because you cannot shut off one.
it's so funny. You and I are obviously we obviously had a similar upbringing. We were raised by the same parents. We were raised in roughly the same socioeconomic class. But I do think that in some ways there were some struggles that I had at the beginning of my work career that you did not have because your path was so clear to you. And so, it was for you, it was school, medical school, doctor. For me, it was philosophy major. What the hell am I doing with my life? I'm down to my last $82 and a plane ticket. Where do I go? I don't have, a meaningful degree. And there were just some times where I had to scrape. There were nights I slept in my car because I didn't have a place to go. There were just some things that I did that I had to do. And I look back on those with regret, but also a little bit of pride in that I was able to kind of function at times when it was hard, when it was very hard to function. And maybe that's the piece of it is there were times where I was like, I know this isn't a good long-term solution, but it will work right now. And I did this recently, and I won't talk about it because you and I already talked about it, but I did something recently where I was like, I'm going to push myself and I'm going to take some things that will allow me to push myself, but I'm going to have a crash. And that crash is very dangerous. But I still did it because I had a short-term need. And I'm not saying that people, should do short-term solutions without worrying about the long-term. But if you do just have to get through it, remember that it might have long-term implications. Whatever you do in the short-term is going to have long-term implications.
I think that's very well said. I mean, Jeff, this is going to come as a real surprise to you. I thrive on structure. And to the point with, as you point out, my academic career and my career trajectory, I put myself purposefully and probably subconsciously in places where I would have structure.
Right.
And at times that came at the sacrifice of spontaneity, of creativity. And there were some things that I, wish I had the time to do or the flexibility to do that I didn't do because I chose this structured lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah. And I actually thrive on a non-structured lifestyle. I really did well as an agent when I went to a new agency and they were like, how much do you want? I was like, $0. I want $0 as a salary, but you're going to pay me the highest commission that you've ever paid an agent. So if I don't work, if I don't bring in money, I don't make anything, but I'm going to make the highest percentage of whatever I do bring in that you've ever paid an agent. And they were like, let's do it. I made the most money that I ever made. I love the fact that it was like, I don't know where my next paycheck's coming from, but I'll figure it out. I love that. And I don't know if it has to do with just the way that you and I are wired differently or our life experience, but it is interesting that you and I are very similar in many ways, but that is one where I think we're different, and that's okay. Random question for you. Can you see any good reason for Severance? I was thinking about this as the what if, because I was thinking about would we want to do this for soldiers? But then I was like, imagine being the soldier who gets done with a mission and then immediately starts the next mission. That doesn't seem like that's a healthy thing for soldiers to do. And then I was just thinking about memory erasure, and that's essentially eternal sunshine for the spotless mind. It was we go through something and then we just erase the trauma so that we don't have to incorporate it and go through the process of grief and the process of trauma. I don't think that would benefit us. I think that we need to go through these traumas so that we learn some resilience. I don't know that I see any good reason for severance.
I thought about this too, and I don't know that I can think of a good one. I can think of a quote
in the show. By the way, we see this with the woman who goes through birth, and so they sever her so it doesn't have to actually go through the
experience the pain of childbirth, which is terrible.
My wife, who is so soft. It is so you just touch her and she's like, oh, that hurt. Loved childbirth both times. Loved it. I just think that's so badass. My wife is very cool, but yeah, she just especially the second time she reached in and pulled the baby out. She was like, can I pull it out? They're like, absolutely. She reached in and just, rah.
That's awesome.
And I was
that's super awesome.
She's fucking great. My wife is just tough as nails when she wants to be. It's very funny.
Whether you think we were designed this way or that we evolved this way, clearly these processes that we go through are meant as something more holistic. You can't yank out the pregnancy part of the memory of that and expect that you are going to have the exact same attachment to the child. You just can't. And so I can't really come up with a good reason for severance. I do go back to a quote from a horrible movie Star Trek V,
Right.
where Spock's brother Sybok is taking people's pain away.
Right.
And
right.
Captain Kirk stops him and said, I need my pain. I thrive on my pain.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. It makes us who we
Great
are.
what
You
if.
cannot be a whole person without your whole experience. You just can't.
Do you though, as a medical professional and for a person who has seen real pain, are you occasionally like, you know what? Yeah, let's just take that one away. I'm going to throw it out there, Josh. I'm going to throw it out there, Josh. Sexual assault victims. I'd be okay if you severed.
I mean, I would be okay to take that away. I think that's the humane
Any
thing.
sort of child abuse, I could take that away.
However, I mean, I think you do it at great peril. You don't know, you start messing with things like memory, you start messing with things like your own consciousness. We don't know enough to know if that's going to be a good thing or not.
Yeah, but we're tinkerers. It's in our nature to tinker.
I hear you, but the medical professional's first ethos is do no harm.
You know what's funny though? We are tinkerers, but like if somebody offered me the experience of either severing or like if in order to sever, somebody else had to take on the trauma, I'd volunteer to take on the trauma. Depending on what it is, obviously, but like there are very few times in my life where the pain of something wasn't worth it to me and that I didn't in some way enjoy and have the thought in the moment, I am experiencing part of the human condition right now. This is great. Like breakups were like, I am really hurting, man. Like, getting fired, I was like, God, I am really scared about my future. This is awesome. I just love the human experience.
I wrote a short story in medical school where in a world in which a doctor was a person who could heal somebody, but they did it by taking on that person's ailment themselves.
Oh, sure.
And so you had a certain number of people you could cure before you died of this stuff. I do want to mention one other really interesting thing about the Severance world that is a real life parallel. The whole Egan family is a really interesting backstory, right? They've created this mythos around Egan with these writings that he did about the 4 tempers and the 9 virtues and all this kind of stuff to really suggest that he and the whole family and the kind of the corporate culture that was built up around him suggests that you have to remove all these ills so that you can be truly industrious. Mm-hmm. That didn't come from nowhere.
Right. This I think is fascinating.
Yeah, and I learned about this a while ago. That actually came from the sanatorium movement, which was the wellness initiative of its time in the late 19th to mid 20th centuries, in which we didn't really have, medical advances hadn't obviously advanced yet. We didn't have antibiotics. And so there was an idea that came from tuberculosis patients where you cohort them out in nature in this nice setting. They breathe in better air and maybe they'll get better. And some of them did. Yeah. But some people took this beyond that to be like, well, maybe we can cure all else of society's ills by these sanatoriums.
I was 38. No, I was older than that. I was 41 years old, Josh, when I realized that sanitarium meant sanitary and not something to do with sanity.
Sanity. Yeah.
Yeah. Sanitarium has more to do with the fact that it's sanitary. Not your sanity, which I thought was really interesting.
And so they built these large sanatoriums out in, kind of the Midwest, really, where they had spacious land. They believed in healthy diets. Sure. They believed in kind of out there techniques like large scale enemas and.
Speaking of enema, I've got a colonoscopy tomorrow.
Oh, well, thanks for that. Kind of a lot of unscientifically based wellness initiatives that
Dude,
came
I
out
cold
of it.
plunge. I love it.
And actually, Dr. John Kellogg, you may recognize that name from cereal fame.
Sure, John
was owned a sanatorium, and he and his brother ran it, and they believed in these crazy diets and trying to suppress your sexual desires. They actually inadvertently invented cornflakes by trying to produce a food that would knock out somebody's sexual desire. And that's where they made their Kellogg's fortune from. So,
wow.
Yeah. Cornflakes. And I think graham crackers also were invented to try to, you eat these things and you won't think about sex.
Wow. All right. Well, let us know in the comments if cornflakes just turn you on. Just curious if there's some cornflake freaks out there.
But they had a family mythos kind of like the Egans, and so that doesn't come from nowhere.
Yeah. I'm going to briefly mention this because I just could not give a shit about it. But like, obviously some of this show is about like the corporate evils. Corporate evils have been done, just to death. And so, like, I really don't care, like, what Lumen is up to. At this point, it's whatever it is. And I think it's probably just, like, the whole point of them being in Severance is to figure out how to sever better. I think that's probably all it is. I'm fine with that. But, like, this show is a little bit about the evils of corporations. If you don't know that corporations are evil at this point, like, you haven't been paying attention.
We have a strip mall near where I live, and I drive by it almost every day.
And strip club,
strip mall, Jeff.
Oh, okay.
And it's got one of those Kumon learning centers, Kumon.
Okay.
And now when I drive by it, I'm like, oof. They're in there severing kids.
I love it. So the top 5 this week, I'm very excited about it. I want to talk about more about what ifs. So this week's top 5. I wish I could have done this about movies, but because Severance is a TV show, I wanted to do, what ifs about TV shows. But this is the top 5 what ifs in the history of television.
Okay.
We will see if Severance makes the list. But before I start, I want to make a quick, and I mentioned this earlier, but I want to make a quick aside and talk about why things are good what ifs and why they're not. So a what if is something that we see in science fiction or in just high concept television. So like a movie like Dream Scenario, it was a great what if. What if some guy starts appearing in everybody's dreams? That's a great what if. It's not really science fiction. It's just a high concept movie. But the purpose of the what if is to drive us towards an understanding about humans and about human connection. If you focus too much on the premise of the what if, it's not as powerful. And so I have a hall of shame. I have some shameful mentions before we get into the tops. And there was a whole series of NBC shows following the success of Lost that worried too much on the premise and not on the people. And this was The Event, which I don't even remember what The Event was.
No, I don't remember that.
They never got around to it. They were just like, do they know about The Event? It was awful. There was Flash Forward, which was all about like everybody flashed forward 6 months in their life. And so they like saw what their life looked like 6 months in the future. There was a show called Revolution where what if all the world's power goes out? And there was a show called Manifest that was a little more recent where a plane that was lost comes back after years or months or whatever. All of those shows failed because they didn't explore the human part enough. And they worried too much about pushing the premise forward. So when it comes to a good what if, it's about the human side. So that is the beginning of our top 5 what ifs.
Well, Jeff, do you have any honorable mentions?
I do. Basically, I just had a top 7, Josh, and so we're just going to do some honorable mentions because it's, every list is a top 5 list. Our honorable mentions are Jericho. You and I both love Jericho. And
I loved it.
Jericho's what if is all of a sudden there's nuclear explosions, some sort of nuclear attack that knocks out our ability to communicate with other cities, and we're essentially on an island where, there's a lot of mistrust, a lot of, unknowns, and how do we get along? How do we kind of build a life from there? It was a great show. I think it went 2 seasons. They made the mistake that everybody makes, which is they just tried to get kind of too deep and too clever in the second season. Yep. But it was a really great setup for a show.
Great early Johnny Depp show.
Johnny Depp light. Oh, poor, what's his name?
Skeet Ulrich.
Johnny Depp light, baby. Okay. And the other one, I want to put this higher, and the only reason I don't have it in my top 5 is because nobody watched this show. But there was a show called Awake with Jason Isaacs.
Yes.
And God, this show was so good. And the what if was, what if you wake up from a car accident and in one world, your wife survived, and in the other world, your son survived. And every time you go to sleep, you switch between worlds. And so he doesn't know which one is real. He's working with therapists who are both like, obviously, this world is real. But every time he goes to sleep, he then, has to deal with like the grief of his wife losing his son and then the son losing his wife. And in the meantime, he's getting to hang out with both. And in the whole time, he's also solving crimes.
I can't believe this show didn't go on for 8 years.
It was such a good show, though. And the psychologists were Cherry Jones and B.D. Wong. And so the therapy scenes were so fucking good.
Sure.
And it was just at a time when nobody was watching NBC. NBC was still sure that they could get like 10 ratings, and so they were canceling anything that like wasn't doing well. It was really sad. But if you get a chance, there's like 10 episodes of it. Find it, watch it. It was a great show, but it's in my honorable mentions.
What's your number 5?
Okay, number 5 is Westworld. This is, again, one that I think could have been higher had they continued with living in Westworld. In the later seasons, they got away from Westworld, which, that's the name of the show. So they should have stayed there. A great what if of, what if there's this land that you can go to and act however you want, and there is no morality. You can treat things however you want. But what if some of those things become sentient? And what does it mean to be alive and have agency? Great HBO show for a season, and then it sort of fell off a cliff. But a great what if. Okay, so number 4 is The Handmaid's Tale. The movie version of this was Children of Men. But what if in the future it starts being really hard to have babies? And the authoritarian regimes that sprout up from that, the misinformation, the distrust, and the forcing of people to do things that they don't want to do. It's a really great what if that had massive implications that I think were spot on in terms of what we would do. And so for that reason, they really nailed that what if of, what if all of a sudden, we start having a problem making babies? And how crazy does the world get?
It's funny. I haven't seen either of those. And I really should. Yeah. All right, you're number 3, Jeff.
So number 3 is Severance. I thought that it was good enough to make the list. We've talked at length about it, but I think it's really well done. And it did go deeper than the Rick and Morty episode. In the second season, they all come back because they realize that if they don't, they die. And so they're essentially like sold into this slavery, but they have to make peace with it because getting out means their death. They cannot be set free in a way. And so, they do come back, and it makes sense that they come back. So I think that they're doing a really good job of bringing forth some other moral elements and doing a really good job of focusing on the people.
Number 2.
So number 2 is arguably my favorite show of all time, and it's The Leftovers. This was an HBO series. It went on for 3 seasons. The people who watched it, it's their favorite show of all time. People who kind of watched the first episodes and fell off, it is what it is, but they have diehard fans. And the what if for this is, what if 2% of the world's population disappeared in an instant? And what I loved about this show is it picks up 3 years after the event that happens. And it's very clear that this is just something that will break us. And it's the slow descent of us into madness and not being able to cope with this thing that has happened. This is something traumatic that we cannot come back from, and we will never be kind of the same. And it has the best ending to a what if show that I've ever seen. Have you seen it? Can I spoil it for you?
I haven't. I have. I'm not going to see it. Go ahead.
Okay, so in the very end, one of the characters figures out a way to cross over because they figure out that like there actually is a world where we know where these people went. So they figure out like, we have figured out where the 2% left. And so there's this one lady who lost her entire family, and so she decides that she wants to go there, and she goes there, and in that world, all of those people lost 98% of the world's population. So they had it way worse than we did. So there was just a split. And so, and her family has like remade a family. They've replaced her. And so she comes back to our world. But I just loved that idea of like, here we are whining about 2% leaving, but the 2% lost 98%. And how do you like come back from that? I thought that was a fantastic ending. It's good from start to finish. It's a fantastic show, and everybody should watch it, even though I just spoiled it for you.
Okay. Well, that was your number 2. So number 1's got to be really good, Jeff. What is it?
Well, it's another Damon Lindelof show. It's got to be Lost. It has to be Lost. What if a plane full of strangers crashes on a beach, and the beach seems to have some mythical elements? It went on for 7 seasons. It didn't just do 7 seasons of cable. This was 7 network seasons, which meant year after year after year. You didn't have these 2-year gaps between 6-episode seasons. Like, they just had to crank this stuff out. I think that the finale is one of the best finales ever. I know people, disagree with me on that, but I thought the last season was great. The sustainability and that what if of just continuing to provide us new and interesting parts of the premise as well as the characters introducing new characters and the way they did that. They went really deep on a lot of the characters. I do think that for all of its flaws, there was so much to that show, and it went on for so long that you have to count Lost as the greatest what-if television show.
I don't know if I agree with you about Lost. Look, I'm not saying it wasn't a great show, but I think even the fact that you have a difficult time formulating what the actual what-if premise is, but as I think about what's the what-if premise, I have a hard time of formulating what the one thing is. And I think that's the problem with Lost, is that it mumble-jumbled up so many different what-ifs that, I mean, maybe that in and of itself is an accomplishment. But you're right. I mean, one of the things it suffered from was that it was back in the era of 7 seasons, 24 episodes a year. That's a lot of freaking content to make. And you would never see that now. I'm not saying it wasn't a great show. I only watched 3 seasons of it before I lost interest. I didn't see the last season.
The last season's good. You should see the last season still.
I will also say another thing that I think we should honor. I'm not sure it belongs in this list because you pointed out that these are TV shows, is I do think that in my world, the greatest what if is actually the Marvel Comics series, literally entitled What If.
Sure.
And, you know, the superhero genre, which I know I love way more than you do, has always been one of my favorite. And they created such a universe. So they said, you know what, all these what if premises that we've already done, let's go back and turn them. And what if we went a different direction with them?
Yeah.
They actually have made now a 3-season, Disney Plus series, animated series, What If, not nearly as good or as deep as the comic books. But I mean, I think the whole idea of the multiverse, of spinning off different versions of your fictional universe, probably came from the Marvel Comics What If series. And I think that needs to be honored in any conversation like this.
Sure. I like that. A show I didn't include, Josh, and I didn't really watch it, but it was an interesting what if, is The Man in the High Castle. Which was, I think, what if the Axis powers, win the war? One, I just don't want to think about it. It's one of those shows where it's like, okay, that's an interesting book, but I don't want to think about that. And they had a whole marketing campaign where they were putting swastikas on essentially movie posters. And I was like, man, no.
Yeah.
If I was Jewish, I would be walking. I mean, I don't even need to be Jewish. I was offended by it. I was really bothered by it. You need to be a little bit careful with what your what if is.
The other show I would add to your list is For All Mankind, which is another Apple TV show. Right. And it's another retro revisionist history. The question there is, what if the Soviets won the race to the moon?
Right.
It's a great show, not because of the premise, but because of the characters. And that's your point.
But here's why I also don't include that type of show, Josh, is because it doesn't lead us to it's not a moral question. It's more of like a logistical question.
It's a logistic. For those of you into logistical fiction, this is a really, really good show.
Right. It's
I don't know why I'm making fun of myself there.
I don't know either. I mean, it's the trolley problem is about like the moral question. And sure, there's some interesting things to be said about like, more logistical what ifs. But that's one of the reasons why it doesn't change the way that I think about morality. It's just like, yeah, the world would be different. And how would it be different? Let's explore some of that. But it doesn't get me to a greater understanding of the human condition, the way that some of these others do. Anyway, that's our top 5. That's our top 5 list that nobody asked for of the best what ifs in television history, Josh. History. Pay no attention to the fact that all of those shows were very recent. It's obviously not a product of my bias towards shows that I've seen. All right, Josh, any last things you want to say about Severance? We did it to death, but it's also, it was a long show. There's a lot to talk about here.
Look, you got to sit with your grief. You just have to. There's no way around it. I wish in some ways, I wish there was a way we didn't have to sit with our grief because it is uncomfortable, but it's part of the human experience. It's part of how your brain grows and works.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess the what if we could avoid grief is we should, digging deep at it.
It would not make us better.
No. Okay. Well, thanks as always for watching or listening to Cinemental and our coverage of Severance. If you like this episode, please subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. You can also watch clips of Cinemental on YouTube, where we would love to hear what you would like us to cover next. You can also watch my companion series, The One Thing, where I take a deeper dive into screenwriting. I will be doing one on Severance and The What If, both available on the Large in Charge channel on YouTube. This has been a Large in Charge production for Josh Jones. I am Jeff Jones, and I also want to start throwing out a special call out to David Haverty. He is our editor. He's been our editor from the beginning, and he's doing a fantastic job. But yeah, that's the crew here, and we will see you next week.
I want you to hit me as hard as you can.